Hey everybody, it is Tony here and welcome to the first ever video on this channel. Kind of funny because I've had this channel for a while now and I've had this platform for a few years. But this is the first video that I'm uploading on this YouTube channel. But without further ado, today I'm going to be making my Stanley Cup Playoff 2023 predictions. And I've left a link to all of my social media platforms below if you want to follow along and watch the hockey playoffs with me. I'm kind of an idiot, but I've got this platform called Tony's Hockey Space, same name as a YouTube channel, and I'm really trying to bring it back, just at least for the playoffs. So we'll see how it goes. But anyways, let's do this bracket challenge. So we're gonna start off with the Western Conference, which is the opposite of how I did my personal bracket that's hanging on my refrigerator. And we're gonna start Colorado versus Seattle. This is going to be a good series. I really hope Seattle pulls it out. But, I have to be a little bit skeptical, especially because of how Seattle ended the season. They were good in their last couple of games, but, they started off a lot better than they wound up finishing overall. So I know Colorado is missing Landeskog. They've had a lot of injury issues in the past over the course of this year. They're Like I said, they're not going to have Landeskog the entire playoff, which really limits them. But at the same time, Tampa Bay had to go through the 2020 Stanley Cup playoffs without Stamkos, and they still won it all that year. So I don't know. I think that Landeskog's impact is a little bit less than Stamkos, just because of how much Stamkos as a captain really meant to the Lightning as opposed to Landeskog for the Avalanche. And not to say that Landeskog is a worse captain, but the Avalanche just have a ton of different threats, up and down their lineup. And I know they're also missing Kadri, but even with all of that, they've still had a really good season. So I'm going to have to say Colorado wins this series. Dallas versus Minnesota. This is going to be a good one because Minnesota is like the number one. They probably have the number one goaltending duo in the NHL. If not them, then Boston, and that's pretty good company to be up there with. But at the same time, Dallas's goaltending is not that far behind. Jake Ottinger proved in the playoffs last year and throughout this year that he's a really good goaltender. So I think that this series, either way, goes to at least 6 games. I think it goes 7. In the end, I'm going to say Dallas. Vegas versus Winnipeg. This is going to be kind of a boring series, I think. Winnipeg kind of just barely squeaked into a playoff spot. It would have been a little bit more entertaining, in my opinion, if Calgary had made the playoffs. I really don't see a way for Winnipeg to win this series unless Hellebuck just has the series of his life. So I'm going to have to say Vegas wins this series. And then Edmonton versus LA. And I also have the Vegas shirt on, by the way. Now, I really do like the Kings, but I cannot, in my good conscience, pick them to win this series. Edmonton, heading into the playoffs, is the hottest team in the NHL. LA, heading into the playoffs, is one of the weaker teams. So, and apparently Fiala, we've discovered, is going to be out for at least the start of the series. He wasn't at practice today. So I'm going to have to say Edmonton wins the series. And I don't think I'm really going out on a limb for that. I got to pick the number of games, so I'm going to go 5 for the Colorado-Seattle series. I'm going to go 7 for Dallas and Minnesota. I'll go 5 again for Vegas and Winnipeg, and then I'll go, I'd say 6 for Edmonton and LA, because I think that goaltending will carry LA to a couple of wins in this series. Because I do think that LA has better goaltending than Edmonton at the moment, but Skinner is going to be enough for Edmonton to get by in the first round. Now moving on to the East, Boston and Florida in the first round. A lot of people are saying that they kind of would anticipate an upset, that Florida actually pulls something out. And the way that Alex Lyon has been playing recently, I can kind of see it. You saw the way that Columbus dismantled Tampa in 2019, and you think, what if this happens again? I'm not as optimistic, though, because Boston is just unreal this season. Ullmark is going to win the Vezina. Boston has won pretty much every big award. Even the players are winning awards. Really, the only awards that they're not winning are being won by McDavid, which is again really good company to be with. So I do, I think the Panthers might give him a little bit of a ride, but apart from Matthew Tkachuk and then maybe Alex Lyon if he turns up in the playoffs, I really don't see any way that Florida is better than Boston. So I'm gonna have to say Boston wins this series. Toronto and Tampa, this is an easy one. Until Toronto wins a playoff series, I'm not going to pick them. So I'm just gonna say Tampa in 7. Carolina versus New York. Now, I have another YouTube channel where I made a bracket, and I guess that's kind of my main bracket. This is sort of my second bracket. But in the video where I was kind of predicting the first round matchups, I said that Carolina is one of the weaker teams heading into the playoffs, while the Islanders are surging. And I stand by that here because the Islanders have been on a roll recently. Carolina without Svechnikov really is not the same team at all. So I think that I have to go with the Islanders even here. I really do not see a way that Carolina wins this series. Especially if they win a road game, then that might alter my opinion a little bit. Because they didn't win a single road game in the playoffs last year, and that's what cost them in the second round. Because the Rangers showed up for that one road game, the Game 7 in Carolina. So that kind of just proves you can't rely on winning at home. So maybe this Carolina team will be better on the road in the playoffs this year. I don't know. We'll see. But without Svechnikov, I can't, in my good conscience, pick them to win this series, so I say Islanders. Devils Rangers, the best series of the opening round. I said what I said. Now, in my main bracket, I have the Rangers winning, but the Devils are a really good hockey team. And the Devils have a lot of firepower, I think. And, home ice advantage is not going to matter so much in this series because I guarantee there will be a lot of Devils fans traveling up to Madison Square Garden. Guaranteed there will be a ton of Rangers fans at the Prudential Center. The Devils had problems earlier in the year getting tickets. I don't know if they'll have the same problems now, but they had problems earlier in the year getting seats filled. But for the sake of being a little bit different in this bracket, I'm going to say Devils because this series, in my opinion, is honestly a toss-up. Both have really good goaltending. Both have great defense, great goal-scoring offense, high-pressing teams. So I'm going to say Devils just because it's anybody's guess who wins that series, honestly. I'm going to say Boston in 5 versus Florida. I'm going to say Tampa wins it in 7. Toronto kind of has this thing where they always lose in the last game of a series. I'm going to say Islanders in 6. I think Carolina will at least win a couple of home games. But until they win on the road, I really do not have any expectations for them, especially without Svechnikov. I'm going to say Devils in 7. All right, so let's move on to the next round. Colorado versus Dallas. I think this is going to be another really good series. Dallas has the upper hand in goaltending. Colorado has the upper hand in almost anything else. But Dallas pushed Calgary to the brink last year. And they're a lot better of a team this year. And Calgary was a really good team last year. They won the Western Conference, or they won the Pacific Division in the regular season. Only finished second in the Western Conference to Colorado. But Dallas easily could have gotten, if it weren't for that one overtime goal in Game 7, they easily could have gotten at least to the conference final. So I think this is going to be a really interesting series. As much as I want to see a Colorado versus Edmonton repeat, I think that Dallas might have the upper hand this year. Again, in my other bracket, I have Colorado winning this series. I have them playing the Wild, though, but for the sake of this bracket, in a matchup between Colorado and Dallas, the way that Dallas has been playing recently, And the fact that Colorado is missing two of their big pieces that led them to the Stanley Cup last season in Landeskog and Kadri, I can definitely see Dallas winning this series. So I'm going to say Dallas wins. Vegas versus Edmonton. Like I said before, Edmonton is the hottest team entering the playoffs. But there was something very interesting that happened a couple of weeks ago. So I like to measure, first of all, I like to watch playoff teams in the regular season. So I will make sure if I'm watching hockey, usually I'm watching on ESPN Plus, I will always make sure to watch two teams that are going to be in the playoffs that either might meet in the playoffs, meet in the Stanley Cup final, whatever. And I saw Vegas play against LA, and I saw Edmonton play against LA. Same LA team, same amount of injuries. They're still a good team, even with injuries, LA. Vegas demolished the Kings. Edmonton squeaked by against them. And I think that, I know that Edmonton's firepower is what has carried them previously to playoff series wins. The one against the Sharks a few years ago, and then the two last year against LA and Calgary. McDavid and Draisaitl have to carry that team in order for them to be successful. Vegas is more of a top-to-bottom type team. They have more depth than Edmonton. They are just all around a better team. Anytime you have your third goaltender is Jonathan Quick. I know he hasn't been great this year, but he's been known to turn it on in the playoffs. So if they ever have to turn to him, he's going to show up. But I say that Vegas wins the series because this has to be the year for them. And I think that a lot of people, a lot of the players on that team, and a lot of the management, they know they need to win this year because their championship window is closing fast and they're getting pressed up against the cap. So I think that attitude is going to really get through to them in the locker room, and I say Vegas wins this series. Boston versus Tampa. Tampa really isn't that good of a team this year. I only have them beating Toronto because Toronto can't seem to get out of the first round. But aside from that, Tampa actually had a worse record than Seattle. And so I really just cannot see Tampa getting out of the second round this year. Unless Vasilevsky really turns it on and Tampa could get the same production that they have in years past. But again, they're missing a lot of major pieces that have helped them to the Stanley Cup previously. Think Ryan McDonough. This year they lost Andre Palat. So I say that Boston wins this series, and that's not too tough of a prediction for me. Islanders and Devils. This isn't another easy pick for me because the Devils, I think whoever wins this series has a one-way ticket to the conference final at least. If Boston gets upset in either of these two rounds, which I don't think they're going to lose against Tampa, maybe they'll lose against Florida in a wild upset. Toronto might have a chance. You never know. If they get out of the first round, they might just go on a run and get all the way to the final. But I don't think Toronto is better than either New Jersey or the Rangers. So I say whoever wins the Jersey versus New York series, if Boston gets eliminated, whoever wins New Jersey versus New York is going to get to the Stanley Cup final and win the Stanley Cup final. So between Jersey and the Islanders, I think the Islanders will get the upset against Carolina just because Carolina looks weak entering the postseason. But the Devils are really a really good team right now, so I've got to pick the Devils to get to the conference final. All right, back west. For the Stanley Cup final, Dallas versus Vegas. Dallas, again, has really good goaltending. Jason Robertson is a great player. Roope Hintz, they're all great players. But I gotta say, I see Vegas having an advantage in this series in almost every position except for goaltending, because I think that Vegas started the season a lot better than they finished it, but they had moments of brilliance throughout the season, and they're going into the playoffs strong. So I say that Vegas wins this series to advance to the Stanley Cup final for, I think, the second time in 5 or 6 years. I think 6 seasons. And then in the East, Boston against New Jersey. Man, would I love to see this series. Between these two teams, it's pretty evenly matched, except goaltending. I think that the Devils could take it to Boston in terms of goal scoring. Um, I think that they're pretty evenly matched offensively. I think defensively, Boston might have a little bit of an edge. But goaltending, Boston, Olmark kind of blows Vanacek out of the water. Just with the season that Olmark has been having. So I say Boston wins this series, gets to the Stanley Cup final. And then the Stanley Cup final that I've been saying I thought would happen since early in the season. The two best teams from about 20 games in, Vegas, Boston. This is going to be a really good series if it happens. The best team in the East versus the best team in the West. And that seems to be the direction we've been heading in, not just in the NHL, but all sports. I mean, last year we saw pretty much the two best teams in the Stanley Cup final. I know Tampa had to beat the President's Trophy winners to get there, but they were the best team in the Eastern Conference for most of the season, besides Florida. And you kind of saw Colorado getting to the Stanley Cup final anyway. Between these two teams, though, I gotta say, Boston has been having an unreal season. So I say that Boston takes this. Tiebreaker is total goals in the final series. I'm going to say that at least 5.5 goals are scored per game. And I say the series goes 6 games. So what would that be? That would be 30 goals total. So let's say 30. And that is my bracket. I've got Boston beating Vegas for the Stanley Cup final. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you next time on Tony's Hockey Space.